can ask for
Thank
5
you,
minutes.
Mr. Chairman. Well, you both have well outlined the extraordinary lack of communication and coordination between the FCC and the FAA. And of course, the NTIA is supposed to arbitrate these sorts of things and intervene, National Technical Information Agency. But they just received their first permanent head since the beginning of the Trump presidency. There were 5 interim heads during his presidency. And hopefully the new head will be able to put them in their rightful place of coordinating as we move forward, because we are not done with this yet. We have temporary measures in place, but there are going to be more towers put out there. The companies consider their towers, their heights, their strength, their location to be proprietary data. It can't be proprietary data. You can't just plop one down next to a critical approach into an airport. But that's what was going on. And the industry refused to share that data, even though there was a very specific request made by the FAA on November 2nd. And finally, on December 22nd, they began to release data on where their secret towers were, what their powers were, where the antennas were pointed. And that's when we began to realize this was going to be a big problem. And in fact, for the first 2 days, they said, oh, well, you can't give this data to anybody. You can't share it. This is secret. So until we finally, the lawyers worked it out, and the FAA could work with the manufacturers and the airlines, and the airports have not really been particularly well informed throughout this whole process. There's just phenomenal room for improvement. There needs to be a formalized process. Memorandums of understanding between affected agencies, dealing with the FCC. This isn't the first instance. The FCC decided to sell off half of the vehicle-to-vehicle safety band. We're moving to automated vehicles, and we're trying to develop things, crash avoidance, vehicle communication. And they said, no, it's much more important that people can stream high D while walking down the street on their cell phone. So they sold off half of that spectrum. They're being litigated, and hopefully they'll lose. And we will preserve that for the future of automobile safety. They also disregarded the concerns of the Department of Defense on letting Legato turn on its satellites with the potential degradation of critical GPS. It's a pattern of ignoring consequences beyond the consequences to the profitability of the telecom industry. That's their only focus. Telecom wants this, they need this, they got to have it. That's got to change. And hopefully the NTIA can negotiate this, or maybe it has to be mandated by Congress. You're going to have memorandums of understanding. You're actually going to meaningfully cooperate and coordinate with these other agencies. You're going to take your sort of regulated, we don't really regulate telecoms anymore. That's why we have the crappiest cell phone service in the world. Your regulated entities are going to communicate things to us, to the affected parties that will affect their industries. I mean, that only makes sense. That only makes sense. And it's so disappointing. And we still have denial. We're going to hear from a witness today who's going to say, oh, whoa, we have much greater safeguards than France now. Oops, not true. She say, oh, they're operating at a much higher power in France. No, 2.5 times higher here. The antenna angles are mandated to be tilted down in France, and they have exclusion zones, and the list goes on around the country, around the world. And they say, oh, because it's safe elsewhere. Well, everybody else has taken measures to protect aviation, but we didn't until the last minute. And it's a temporary agreement, and something has to be worked out long-term in the next 6 months as they deploy more of these towers. They want to put them right in the flight path because, we want to get to that neighborhood over there. That's going to be a high-profit center for us, so we want to have an antenna right there. There have to be some restrictions and agreements because we cannot have conflicting industries. Having a dropped call is way less serious than having a dropped airplane out of the sky. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.